The scent of the ocean usually brought me a sense of peace, a reminder of vast possibilities and horizons yet to be explored. That morning, at the terminal in Fort Lauderdale, the air was thick with humidity and the smell of diesel fuel, but to me, it smelled like victory. My suitcase, packed with crisp linens and a new swimsuit I had felt brave enough to buy, sat obediently at my feet. I adjusted my oversized sunglasses, watching the throngs of excited travelers navigating the check-in lines. I was ready. This was the family vacation to the Bahamas we had been planning for the better part of a year. At 64, I had spent the last decade in a state of perpetual service. I was the mother, the grandmother, the wallet, and the safety net. But today, I was just Eleanor, a woman about to step onto a luxury liner with her son, Julian, his wife, Bianca, and my two beautiful grandchildren, Leo and Mia. I checked my watch. They were late, but that was Julian's way. I sat on a hard plastic bench, smoothing the fabric of my travel dress, smiling at a young couple struggling with a stroller. I imagined the next 10 days, buffet dinners, watching the kids splash in the pool, maybe even a quiet cocktail at sunset. Then, my phone vibrated against my thigh. I pulled it out, expecting a text saying, or look for us near the entrance. Instead, the screen illuminated with a message from Julian. The words were stark, glowing with a cruelty I couldn't immediately comprehend. Asterisk, Mom, change of plans. You aren't coming on the ship. Bianca and I talked, and we really need this to be just the core family. We need the space. We'll explain when we get back. Asterisk, I stared at the phone, the world around me, the laughing tourists, the announcements over the loudspeaker. The honking shuttles seemed to mute into a dull roar. Core family. The phrase bounced around my skull. Was I not core? Was the woman who paid for Julian's college, who bought their first car, who literally put the roof over their heads, not core enough? I stood up, panic rising in my throat, and scanned the upper walkway leading to the gangway. I needed to see them. I needed to know this wasn't a mistake. And then I saw them. They were already past security, standing on the elevated promenade that led to the ship. Julian was looking down at his phone, likely checking to see if I had responded. Bianca was laughing, her head thrown back, adjusting me as They looked unburdened. They looked happy. They looked like a family that had successfully trimmed the excess fat from their lives. I was the excess fat. I didn't scream. I didn't wave. A cold, hard stone settled in the pit of my stomach, replacing the fluttering excitement of moments before. I gripped the handle of my suitcase until my knuckles turned white, turned around, and walked toward the taxi stand. I didn't look back at the ship. The vessel that was supposed to carry me to paradise was now just a floating monument to my own foolishness. The ride back to the suburbs took 45 minutes. The driver, a chatty man named Arthur, tried to make small talk about the weather, but after seeing my face in the rearview mirror, he wisely turned up the radio. Jazz music filled the cab, a stark contrast to the chaotic storm brewing inside me. When I unlocked the front door of the house, the silence greeted me like a ghost. This was the house I had bought 5 years ago. It was a beautiful, sprawling, ranch-style home in a good school district. I remembered the day we signed the papers. Julian had hugged me, tears in his eyes, saying, "We'll pay you back, Mom, every cent, and you'll always have a room here." I walked into the living room. My room was a converted study on the first floor, far enough away from the master bedroom so I wouldn't be a bother, but close enough to hear when the baby cried in the middle of the night, which I usually tended to so Bianca could sleep. I dropped my bag and walked straight to the filing cabinet in my small office space. My hands weren't shaken. They were steady, with a terrifying precision. I pulled out the thick manila envelope labeled Property Deeds. There it was, the deed to the house. My name, Eleanor Vance, was the only one printed on the legal bond paper. Julian and Bianca had terrible credit at the time of the purchase. They couldn't even qualify for a lease, let alone a mortgage. I had used my retirement savings for the down payment and took the mortgage in my name. I had paid every single installment. Julian often said, "Mom, we need to transfer the title eventually so we can build equity." I always agreed, saying we would do it soon. But life got in the way. Or perhaps my intuition had gotten in the way. I sat at my desk and pulled out a calculator. I did the math. The mortgage had been paid off in full 3 months ago, using a small inheritance I received from my late brother. The house was free and clear, and it was mine. A strange clarity washed over me. It wasn't rage as hot and messy. This was cold. This was indifferent. It was the feeling of a contract being breached. They had broken the social contract of our family. I provide, you respect. They wanted to be a core family. Fine, they could be a core family in a house they actually owned. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Mr. Henderson, it's Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, it's been ages. Everything all right? I need to sell a property. Robert, immediately. And I need to know the eviction laws for non-lease occupants who are ... family. The line went silent for a moment. This is about the Elm Street house. Julian's place. It's not Julian's place, Robert. It's my place. And I need it sold before a ship docks in 10 days. The next 48 hours were a blur of calculated efficiency. I contacted a real estate shark named Victoria, a woman I knew from my bridge club, who was known for closing deals faster than she finished her Chardonnay. I told her the situation. Cash buyers only, priced to move, closing in 7 days. I have a waiting list for that neighborhood, Victoria said, her voice trembling with professional excitement. I can have people there tomorrow. Do it, I said. I'll be there to let them in. I used my key to enter the main part of the house the next morning. It felt like trespassing, even though I legally owned every nail and board. I walked through the hallway, looking at the photos. Me and Julian at his graduation, me holding Leo when he was born. Slowly, I noticed something. In the newer photos, the professional ones taken last Christmas, the ones from their trip to Disney, I wasn't there. I had been the photographer, or I had been left at home to watch the dog. I wasn't being erased. I had never been part of the picture to begin with. I was the frame, essential for holding it together, but unnoticed. Victoria brought a young couple, the Davises, that afternoon. They were architects, heavily pregnant with their first child, and looking for a forever home. They walked through the rooms with wide eyes. They loved the natural light. They loved the garden I had planted with my own hands. We can offer full asking price, the husband said, looking at me with hope. We can wire the funds in 3 days, but we need to move in by the 1st of the month. The 1st of the month is perfectly fine. I smiled. The house will be empty. The sale was finalized in record time. Mr. Henderson handled the paperwork with a grim efficiency. He drafted a notice to Julian and Bianca, explaining that the property had been sold and that their belongings were being moved to a climate-controlled storage facility, paid for 3 months in advance. I spent the next 3 days packing. I didn't pack maliciously. I carefully wrapped Bianca's collection of ceramic vases. I folded Julian's clothes. I packed the children's toys with care. I hired a moving company to transport everything to the storage unit. When the house was empty, it echoed. It sounded like a cathedral of lost causes. I stood in the center of the living room, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. I put on a playlist of old Motown hits on my phone, music I loved, but Julian always asked me to turn down. I danced. I spun around the empty room, my feet sliding on the wood, humming along to the Temptations. It was a dance of liberation. I was shedding the skin of the useful mother. I was no longer the ATM. I was no longer the built-in babysitter. I was Eleanor, and Eleanor had plans. I wrote a letter and left it on the kitchen island, the only surface remaining in the house. Julian and Bianca. I hope the cruise was everything you imagined. I hope the core family time was restorative. When you sent that message, you clarified something I had been afraid to admit to myself, that my value to you was conditional on my utility. You wanted space. I have given you the ultimate space. This house, which I legally own and paid for, has been sold. The new owners, a lovely couple named the Davises, move in on Tuesday. Do not disturb them. Your belongings are safe in Unit 404 at the downtown storage center. The key is with the facility manager. I have paid for 3 months. After that, it's up to you. I am taking a trip of my own. Do not look for me. I need to find out who I am when I'm not being used. Mom, I left the keys on top of the letter. I walked out, locked the door, and dropped the final set of keys in the mailbox for the new owners. My flight to Tuscany departed 4 hours later.
I had a sister, Catherine, whom I hadn't seen in 5 years. She was the wild one, the artist who moved to Italy to paint landscapes and drink wine while I stayed behind to be the responsible matriarch. For years I judged her. Now I envied her. I had called her the night of the cruise incident. Catherine. I had said, my voice cracking. Can I come stay with you? It's about time, Ellie, she had replied, no questions asked. Italy was a shock to the system. The light was different there, golden and hazy, like honey suspended in the air. Catherine lived in a renovated farmhouse outside of Siena. It smelled of rosemary and wood smoke. For the first week, I didn't turn on my phone. I slept. I slept for 12 hours a day, exhausting a fatigue that had settled in my bones over decades. When I wasn't sleeping, I sat in Catherine's garden, watching the bees navigate the lavender. You look like a ghost who just realized she's dead, Catherine said one evening, pouring us both a glass of Chianti. I feel like I amputated a limb, I admitted. But the limb was gangrenous. They'll be back tomorrow, Catherine noted. The cruise ends. I know. I turned my phone on the next evening. The barrage of notifications nearly caused the device to freeze. 47 missed calls. 80 text messages. Voicemails that filled the inbox to capacity. I scrolled through them, detached, like reading a story about someone else. Asterisk Julian. Yesterday for PM Mom? Where are you? The key doesn't work. Asterisk. Asterisk Julian. Yesterday for 15 PM Mom. Is this a joke? The neighbors say you moved out. Asterisk. Asterisk Bianca. Yesterday 5:30 PM Eleanor. This is insane. We have children. You can't do this. Asterisk. Asterisk Julian. Today 2 AM we're at a motel. Leo is crying. How could you be so selfish? Asterisk. Selfish. The word made me laugh out loud, a dry rasping sound. I had given them a $500,000 head start in life, and reclaiming my own property was selfish. I didn't reply. I put the phone away and signed up for an oil painting workshop in the village. 2 weeks passed. The messages shifted from anger to bargaining. Asterisk Julian. Mom, look, we're sorry about the cruise. It was a misunderstanding. We just thought you'd be bored. Please call us. We can fix this. Asterisk. Asterisk Bianca. The kids miss their nana. We found a rental, but it's small. We need our support system. Asterisk. Support system. I muttered to the canvas in front of me. I was painting a cypress tree. It looked more like a green smudge, but the instructor, a patient man named Alessandro, said I had vigorous strokes. They don't miss you, Ellie, Catherine said, looking over my shoulder. They miss the convenience of you. I know, I said. That's why I'm not calling back. But the silence was hard. I missed Leo's sticky hands. I missed reading stories to Mia. They were the innocent casualties in this war of boundaries. But I knew that if I caved now, if I swooped in to save them from the consequences of their entitlement, nothing would change. I decided to stay in Italy for 3 months. I rented a small studio apartment in the village, so I wouldn't overstay my welcome with Catherine. I bought a bicycle. I learned how to ask for bread and cheese in Italian. I made friends with a baker named Sophia who thought my American accent was charming. For the first time in 40 years, I wasn't anyone's mother. I was just Eleanor. And Eleanor, it turned out, like spicy pasta, waking up late, and painting terrible landscapes. One afternoon, 6 weeks into my exile, I was sitting at a cafe in the piazza when a shadow fell over my table. I looked up, expecting the waiter. It was Julian. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, his hair was unkempt, and he had dark circles under his eyes that mirrored my own from months ago. How did you find me? I asked, my voice steady. Aunt Catherine posted a photo of you on Instagram, he said, clutching a backpack strap. She didn't tag the location, but I recognized the cathedral in the background. I gestured to the empty chair opposite me. Sit down, Julian. He sat. He didn't order anything. He just stared at me, as if trying to reconcile the mother he knew, the one in aprons and sensible shoes, with this woman in a linen scarf drinking espresso in Tuscany. We hired a lawyer, he said, to contest the sale. Mr. Henderson told me you might. I took a sip of coffee. He also told you that you have no case. The deed was in my name. The payments were mine. It was our home, Mom. It was my house, Julian. You made it a home where I wasn't welcome. He flinched. It was one trip. One stupid trip. Why did you have to burn everything to the ground? Because you didn't just exclude me from a trip. I leaned forward. You dismissed me from the family. You told me, quite clearly, that I was an accessory. A wallet with a pulse. You wanted to be independent? I gave you independence. We're struggling, he whispered, his voice cracking. Rent is expensive. Daycare is a fortune. Bianca had to go back to work full-time. Welcome to adulthood, Julian. It's hard. I did it alone for 20 years after your father left. I worked 2 jobs so you could have soccer cleats and piano lessons. I never complained. And I never excluded you. He looked down at his hands. Tears were silently tracking down his cheeks. I thought the house was ours. Implicitly. Nothing is implicit, Julian. Gratitude certainly isn't. We sat in silence for a long time. The church bells rang across the square. I miss you, he said finally. And for the first time, it sounded like he meant me, not the services I provided. Not because of the money. Or the babysitting. I realized I don't really know you. I just know you as Mom. I'm learning to know myself too, I said softly. Bianca is furious. She says you're vindictive. She's allowed to feel that way. But she's not allowed to treat me like staff anymore. So what now? Julian wiped his eyes. Are you staying here forever? No, I said. I have a visa for another month. Then I'm coming back to the States. To live with us? The hope in his voice was reflexive. No. Ilauga gently. Absolutely not. I'm buying a condo. A small one. Just for me. In the city near the art museum. And us. We will have Sunday dinners, I said firmly. Once a week. I will see the grandchildren then. If you need a babysitter, you will ask me 3 days in advance, and I reserve the right to say no if I have plans. And you will never, ever assume my time or my money is yours again. Julian took a deep breath. He looked terrified, but he also looked relieved, as if the burden of unearned entitlement was finally being lifted off his shoulders. Okay, he nodded. Okay, that sounds fair. It is fair, I said. It's respect. He stayed in Italy for 2 days. We walked through the vineyards. We talked about things we hadn't discussed in years, his fear of failure, my regrets about his father, the way Leo laughed just like my brother used to. We didn't fix everything. The scar was there and it was deep. But the wound was no longer infected. When I returned to the US a month later, I stuck to my guns. I bought a chic 2-bedroom condo downtown with the proceeds from the house sale. I furnished it with modern pieces, nothing like the heavy oak furniture of my past. The first Sunday dinner was awkward. Bianca was stiff, barely speaking to me, handing me the salt with icy politeness. But Leo and Mia tackled me with hugs, oblivious to the tension, delighted by the Italian chocolates I had brought them. Over time the ice thawed. Not completely, but enough. Bianca realized that without my financial cushion, she had to be stronger, and she rose to the challenge. Julian became more present with his children, realizing he couldn't outsource their upbringing to me. And me? I joined a local gallery. I volunteer at the Botanical Gardens. I have a date next Friday with a retired literature professor named Henry. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my balcony overlooking the city lights, sipping a glass of wine that costs more than $5, I think back to that moment at the cruise terminal. I remember the stinging humiliation, the feeling of being discarded like an old wrapper. It was the most painful moment of my life. But as I look at the painting on my easel, a vibrant, chaotic, beautiful depiction of a Tuscan sunset, I realize something profound. Sometimes I wonder if I would have found this version of myself without the heartbreak. Probably not. Pain is a terrible teacher, but it is an effective one. They wanted just the core family. And in the end, that's exactly what we all got. They got each other, forced to stand on their own 2 feet. And I found the core of myself, buried under decades of self-sacrifice, still intact, still beating, and finally free.